Well, folks, President Trump has very, very strong ambitions to use tariffs to leverage the American economy and our trading partners to do what Americans and President Trump want. Most notably with Canada and Mexico, President Trump has imposed tariffs on both countries in order to get illegal immigration and drug smuggling under control. And today we're going to talk about how these could affect the American economy. Could we see a recession, and what are the plans for these tariffs? But before we get into it, drop down below and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from our channel in the future. Now, tariffs, as we know, President Trump has rolled out multiple different plans when it comes to tariff in other countries. The first plan has to do with Mexico, Canada, and China. And then the second plan is a much broader tariff plan that will focus on any country that tariffs American products, and they're referring to it as reciprocal tariffs. The first set of tariffs are related to illegal immigration and drug smuggling. So when it comes to Mexico, Canada, and China, that has to do with illegal immigration and drug smuggling. This is because during the Biden administration, millions of illegal immigrants came into the United States every single year through Canada and through Mexico. President Trump is now using the leverage that we have as the economic powerhouse of the world to leverage both of these countries to curb illegal migration from other countries. Because what would happen is, like, from South America, people would come up through South America and then they would join a caravan and they would come through Mexico and get to the northern border of Mexico and the southern border of the United States. Trump wants Mexico to do more to stop them from coming into Mexico to begin with. You need to stop them before they even get close to the American border. You need to stop them when they're at the Mexican southern border. He feels Mexico should be doing more to combat that, which is 100% correct. I 100% believe and I support President Trump's decisions to use tariffs for that exact purpose. If we are trying to curb illegal migration, and the same thing from Canada, other illegal migrants are coming into Canada and then coming into the United States, almost using Canada as a proxy, somewhere they're stopping before they get to the United States. And like we said, he is using tariffs as leverage on both of these countries to curb migration and illegal migrants from getting into the United States. Now, after the first threat of tariffs, Trump was able to get an early win with both countries when each agreed to put 10,000 troops respectively on their border with the United States. Canada also agreed to invest $1.2 billion in border security with the United States, a huge win for the Trump administration in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the new administration. And since then, the amount of drugs confiscated at the border with Canada, or I should say, let's start off in general. The amount of drugs that have been confiscated at the border in general have dropped almost 70% from where we were just back in November or October. And the amount of border encounters with individuals illegally trying to get into the United States has dropped 90% since Trump took office. We were looking at having one of the lowest months on record in January and February. One of the lowest months on record we haven't seen in decades and decades and decades. And we know the tariffs were put on China because that is where the fentanyl is coming from. You know, illegal migration, Mexico, Canada. Fentanyl production, China. Fentanyl smuggling, Mexico and Canada. The same thing applies there, where President Trump has put these, and there's more than just fentanyl, that's a big one, but I also think it has to do with the stealing of intellectual property from the American economy. China, they'll do anything to rip off the United States. We have great inventors, great, brilliant people in this country that have created wonderful products that are then ripped off by Chinese counterparts. And President Trump has put tariffs on them. And let's not forget that during Biden's administration, there was more tariff revenue collected under Biden's administration than there was under Trump's first administration. Think about that. Over $50 billion more dollars were collected under the Biden administration relative to the first Trump administration. Because did Biden not only keep the tariffs on China in place, he also doubled down and put more tariffs in place on China, which I wasn't opposed to. And I'm not opposed to it now. But liberals who are all of a sudden so opposed to these tariffs going on China, well, were you mad when Biden did that and increased the tariffs? I don't think so, because, you know, you guys have the memory of a squirrel. You know, 5 seconds later, boom, gone. It's like it never even existed. And like we said, President Trump wants China to do more to curb these illegal drugs from getting into the United States. First of all, we need to stop them from being manufactured in China. Number two, they need to crack down on the distribution networks that gets these drugs out of China, into Mexico, into Canada, into the United States. They need to obviously do more. We're going to see what happens, but this was the same thing. The last 8 years we've been in a trade war with China, and it is what it is. But to blame this all on Trump is totally shows the lack of understanding of the history, just the last 10 years of trade with our counterparts in China. And the second part of Trump's tariff plan is the reciprocal tariffs like we talked about. In this process, the United States will be looking and we're supposed to know by, I think, April 1st or 2nd, that the United States is looking at these tariffs that other countries have on the United States, and then they are assessing each one individually, and then are going to use reciprocal tariffs to counter these countries and hopefully lower tariffs across the board on American goods. So the ultimate goal here is, or the theory behind it is let's just say with Canada, and I'm just using them as an example, let's just say on their dairy products, I believe on all dairy products, they have about between like 230% to 270% tariff on all dairy products that come from the United States. In a reciprocal tariff plan, Trump would then put that same exact tariff on dairy goods coming from Canada into the United States, with the ultimate goal of both countries bringing down their tariffs and opening up free trade, because that's ultimately what we need. We need free trade. Free trade is what is going to build our economy. Now, obviously, for national security reasons, I think there are certain areas where you want to have tariffs in place. You look at the steel company out in Pennsylvania that they tried to sell to Japan. For national security reasons, we could not let that happen. We just couldn't. There's plenty of situations like that where it is a national security issue. We need to make sure that we have secure supply chains. We cannot be, if you want to talk about chips. Taiwan makes what? 90%, 80% of all chips on the planet, processing chips. Okay, well, if China took over Taiwan and absolutely shut that down, we're SOL. And that's why President Trump is trying to bring as much investment from chip manufacturers into the United States, so that in the event that there is a supply chain squeeze or there is some sort of world conflict in which we no longer have access to those markets in Taiwan, we need to make sure we are self-sufficient for national security reasons. For national security reasons, we need to have domestic production of things, of products. But ultimately, you also want to protect workers. Should it just be a race to the bottom? If we can build a car here in the United States for $40,000 and then we sell it for $45,000, but if we send it to Mexico, they can make it for $25,000 and sell it for $30,000 back into the United States. Well, are there unfair labor practices? How is Mexico exploiting their workers in the sense where maybe they're able to pay them less? Maybe they're able to give them less benefits. They put them under much, much more stress. Is that really fair for the American economy, for the American worker, to have to compete with slave wages in other countries? I don't think in every situation, because ultimately when you put tariffs in place to protect a domestic industry that isn't necessarily vital for national security, they can become lethargic. They don't have any reason to compete because they're being subsidized by the United States government. I think there are certain situations for national security reasons, but I think there are way, 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 way less reasons for purely to protect a domestic industry. Ultimately, you want to make sure that there are Americans who manufacturing was a big thing, and when manufacturing jobs left, it left a big gap in our economy and with workers. People who just didn't go back to work after that. You need to make sure there are solutions for these people to get them employed, get them back into the economy, help them be a productive member of society. And now, getting back to the second part of Trump's reciprocal tariff plans. Now, Trump has said it works both ways. If another country decides to remove or lower a tariff on the United States, the U.S. will respond in a similar fashion and lower the tariff on their product. But the same thing could be true where if they decide to raise the tariff because of that, we're going to raise the tariff as well. But we have to make a very, very clear distinction when moving forward that there are two ways, and there's three ways, but for today we're going to focus on two ways that tariffs can be used. The first way is leverage. Using our power as the economic powerhouse of the world to force other countries to fall in line with what we want them to do. We're trying to coerce them to agree to something, whether it's a geopolitical conflict, whether it's purchasing more products from the United States, whatever it is, we can use the leverage that we have to get them to do what we want. This is a type of tariff, if used properly, I 100% support. But here's the thing. In order for that to work, you must clearly define what the end goal of the tariff is. Something I feel that Trump, when it comes to Canada, has not done a great job with. And it doesn't mean that I don't support what Trump's doing. I just don't think he has clearly defined what the end goal is with Canada. This is something that President Trump has used many, many times during his first term. In 2019, he threatened Mexico with a 25% tariff if they didn't do more to secure the border with the United States. What did they do? They secured the border with the United States. No tariff went on. He also did this with Turkey, where they had taken hostage a pastor from the United States and imprisoned him. And Trump threatened Turkey with tariffs and economic sanctions if they didn't release this pastor. He was released very quickly after. But then the second way that those tariffs could be used is through economic policy, using tariffs as an actual tool to generate revenue for the country and make it a routine, structural part of our economy. And this is something that I 100% do not support. Tariffs as an economic policy drives up prices, creates bloated industries that are forced to not compete. They're not forced to compete with other products in other markets, which in turn creates less innovation in those industries. Competition is what creates innovation. An industry without competition, where there's a domestic industry with no foreign competition, they're going to do what they want. It's going to be lethargic. You know, it's not really 100% applicable, but you look at the schooling system in America. Why is it that our schools have become so lethargic? Because there's not a proper incentive structure in place. There isn't. There's not a proper incentive structure to get the results that we want as society. There are less schools. There's public schools and there's private schools, basically. Public schools, they basically have a monopoly on it because they get the tax dollars regardless. They're getting tax dollars sent there whether they have, they're going to collect property taxes from the owners in the county. And even if a family decides to send their kids to private school, in most states, the money is still going to go to the school district or to the state. It really is just as simple as that. And that's why you have a bloated education system that really, really needs to, there needs to be some serious structural reforms in our education system. But as a part of an economic policy, when it comes to businesses, private enterprises, it creates less innovation in those industries because free trade, when possible, is the best economic policy. It lowers costs for everyone across the board. It creates good relationships with our trading partners and our geographical neighbors. Why not leverage the power of multiple different economies that maybe that are better at doing something than another country? Maybe Canada's better at generating electricity, and they're better strategically positioned to generate electricity at a better cost than we are in the United States. And I'm just throwing that out there because that's not necessarily true, but that's just an example where if they're better positioned to do that, why do it in the United States if it's more expensive and it's going to drive up prices when we can give this to Canada, have no tariff on it, and then have it come into the United States so we can purchase it from them, which then in return creates leverage for us. And then we can sell our products to Canada, and it's a back and forth. But I 100% agree. President Trump wants to close, on top of this, wants to close the trade deficit, which I 100% agree with. If we are going to be buying lots of products and lots of products from other countries, they need to do more to buy products from us. It's just as simple as that. But when it comes to an actual economic policy, no, I do not support this. President Trump is kind of teased with that. It is not something I support in the slightest bit. I'm all about it if we are trying to. Mexico needs to reduce illegal immigration into the United States by 95%, or else there will be a 25% tariff. There's a clear objective, there's a clear consequence, there's a clear cutoff for when this occurs, this does not occur. The tariff does not go into place. But I don't think Trump's done a good enough job with Canada when it comes to that. And we're going to kind of get into that. But also, like we said, national security, we're not going to get into it now, but to have domestic production of certain elements or products that are vital for our national security and our national defense, especially if we were to get into a war with China or Russia or another country, we don't want to be SOL. China takes over Taiwan. Taiwan decides China decides they're not selling chips to anyone anymore, especially to the United States. Well, we're SOL then, because just to record this video, I have a chip in both of my computers here, in my laptop and in my phone right here. I'm just saying. That's going to be pretty hard to replace that, and that's why Trump is moving forward, trying to get investment in the United States from these chip manufacturers. Now, this is something, as far as how could these tariffs hurt the American economy, especially when it comes to Canada, that I worry about. Tariffs can hurt the United States if there is not a defined goal that must be achieved for the tariffs to be either not enforced or to be taken off. With Canada, President Trump wants Canada to do more to curb illegal immigration and stop drug trafficking. But the reality is, less than 10% of all illegal immigration that comes into the United States comes through the Canadian border with the United States. And less than 0.002% of all fentanyl seized in 2024 by Customs and Border Patrol were seized at the northern border. There was like 21,000 pounds of fentanyl, or ounces of, I think it was pounds. I think it was pounds. 21,000 pounds or ounces that were seized by Customs and Border Patrol. Out of that 21,000, 43 were seized at the northern border with Canada. Last month alone, I don't even think they seized like half an ounce of fentanyl, which, granted, half an ounce of fentanyl could take out an entire town of people. Do not get me wrong on that. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that amount is not dangerous. All I'm saying is, relatively speaking, this is not a good, much more of this comes from Mexico than it comes from Canada. And when Trump just says Canada needs to do more to reduce fentanyl, well, okay, there's this thing called the law of diminishing returns. Eventually, you get so close to your goal where last month they only seized half an ounce. Okay, that's pretty damn good when you have, a couple thousand coming through the border every single month in the United States from Mexico. And the issue is without a clear objective with Canada, where it's just a broad, you need to do more to help stop illegal immigration and stop drug trafficking. Well, that's not a very clear objective. I feel like with Mexico, you can say that, and it can be much more applicable because most of the drugs come from Mexico. Most of the illegal migration comes from Mexico. You can see a reduction in illegal immigration, and drug trafficking from the southern border. You can clearly see that. But when you're talking about Canada, where we're talking about minuscule amounts, or relatively speaking, without a clear objective, this could damage the economy, as there is no goal for Canada to hit in order for the tariffs to come off. President Trump needs to be negotiating with Canada to lower these tariffs. Or he needs to explain to the American people, what is the clear objective? If it's not tariffs, what is it? Do you want a mineral deal with Canada? Do you want Canada to be the 51st state? Regardless of what it is or how far off some people may think it is, just give us a clear policy objective that you want to see, because then not only is it going to avoid tariffs just staying in place for longer than necessary, it also is a defined line for where you get a policy win. Once Canada does this, the tariffs come off, Trump gets a win. So it's not only about the American economy, it's about Trump getting wins. Set a defined goal, so then when you hit that defined goal, there's a clear win that you get. You can go on the airwaves and you can brag about it. You can run on it. Because, as we know, the biggest threat to the second Trump presidency is a bad economy. Trump ran on fixing the economy, dealing with inflation and slow wage growth. And if tariffs become too inflationary for the country to handle, Trump will most likely have to back off at least a little bit, or find a way to make a very quick deal, if it hasn't already happened already, so he has a reason to back off tariffs with Mexico or Canada. There was I'm just going to try and find this video real quick right now. Let's see, this was Scott Jennings made a really good point with Al Franken on CNN. Let's see if I can find, here we go. Let's just take a listen to this right now. Scott Jennings makes a really good point when you come to, Trump talked about lowering prices on day one. And Scott Jennings really puts Al Franken in kind of backs him into a corner. Let's just take a listen real quick.
You've been around a long time.
Yeah.
Would you judge a presidency based on 1 day or 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
You would judge a whole
presidency. You gave me a choice.
I'm asking, would you judge a presidency on 1 day in the markets or a 6 week period after having just taken over?
I wouldn't, but if he's someone who said, as soon as I take office, what you're going to see is prices lower and growth, and the economy is going to be great, then you can hold them to the 6 weeks and say, no. That's what's happened is the opposite of what you promised when you're on the campaign trail.
So in 6 months from today, if it looks like we do have an upswing in manufacturing and it looks like the structural changes are benefiting people, will you come back and say, Lord have mercy, it looks like he was right?
I will.
Damn right you will. Damn right, because you know what? When we're talking about big structural changes, things don't happen overnight. Things do not happen overnight like this. This is going to take time. It is just as simple as that. Things take time. The structural changes that are occurring take time to occur. So that's going to wrap things up for today. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think the biggest threat to Trump's second presidency is? And do you think that Trump needs to do a better job of clearly defining what Canada needs to do in order to achieve the goal? Because not only will it be better for America, but it'll be better for the world. Drop down below, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future.